So check one, two, check one, two. Okay, let me turn this on. I'm gonna have some more interactions on TikTok with these atheists on the proposition atheism is false, making a distinction between positive atheism and negative atheism. Because that's what you guys do. You made a distinction between those two. So I have to make a distinction as well. And you guys love negative atheism because the position of I'm unconvinced is a very, very attractive position to be in because you get to just shut down everything that is brought to you by the Christian by simply saying, I'm unconvinced, I'm unconvinced, I'm unconvinced. And even though being unconvinced does not entail that God does not exist, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter to you. Even though it's a non sequitur, doesn't matter to you. But it matters to me. And I like to point these things out. I like to point them out that you saying you're unconvinced does not logically and necessarily follow or entail that God does not exist. It doesn't. So, what could accurately describe that position is this: it doesn't matter. It's literally it. It doesn't matter. The position itself does not matter. You being unconvinced of God's existence doesn't matter. That's a fact. Doesn't matter at all. So let me see what I'm going to bring up here on my documents. From my documents. Let me, hold on, bring this here. All right, so we have,
Yo, what's up, man?
what's his name? Just.
You're muted, bro. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, bro. What's up?
All right. I can't see your profile. What's your name? Justin?
Nah, it's just call me just.
Okay, Just. Are you an atheist?
No, actually, I came to have like a couple questions. I'm not an atheist. I just like came to have like I know you like debate people. I just came for like some advice on how to debate that atheism is false because I normally like go on debate myself and try to debate people atheism is false. I just came for some advice from you.
Okay.
I think yeah.
Yeah, so the reason why I say atheism is false is because atheism is a model of reality in that there are things that are entailed from saying God does not exist, or things that are entailed from having the position that you are unconvinced that God exists. And it is that the universe is only natural. It is only physical. Only physical things exist. Only natural things exist. Brute facts are real in that things exist without any reason and without any ultimate explanation. And that's a false worldview. It's negated by our worldview, which is a Christian one, that God is the ultimate unifying causal principle who actualizes, sustains, and governs all things. And by denying that, you have placed yourself in a model of reality where reality itself is God independent, something that you can't prove, which makes atheism false.
Okay, so like, how do I like debate people who like bring up like the point of like, oh my God, so how does God allow people like? I was doing this one guy. He said, how does God allow people to suffer from skin cancer? And like, how would I go about debating something like that?
Well, first you would have to engage on the worldview level. The person who is making the objection, does their worldview provide them with objective moral ethics where they can look at something and call it evil, and it is evil in and of itself objectively and not just based on their opinion? Because if it's based on their opinion, then skin cancer being evil or being bad is just their opinion. But if they grant that your worldview is true, then the way we explain evil is by saying that God has ordained that evil exists so that he can use evil for his purposes, and his purposes are good. The example that we should always go to is the story of Joseph. When his brothers thought that he was going to take revenge on them, he said to his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant the evil for good." So evil exists to fulfill God's purposes. God's purposes are good, therefore evil exists for good. And that is how we reconcile in our worldview, our paradigm, and it's consistent and coherent, whereas the alternative is that there is no evil, it's just my opinion, but why does your opinion matter, is the new question.
Right, okay. One more point, like people bring up this thing from Deuteronomy.
From what? They bring up what? From what? You there? Just, you there? I think you're muted. I can't hear you. No, okay. I'm frozen. Oh, it's me. So I'm the problem. It doesn't seem like I'm the problem. Wait, can everybody hear me? He said I'm frozen. Am I frozen, Levi?
Oh, you're good. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
I just wanted to address a few things you said earlier. You said that, the atheism worldview entails naturalism. That's just simply false.
How are you defining atheism?
Lack of belief in a God. Nowhere in that does it entail naturalism.
You are absolutely right. How am I defining atheism?
Well, if you're defining it idiosyncratically, then...
No, it's not idiosyncratically. Nope.
So how do you
my
define
definition
atheism?
is supported by authoritative sources like Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The definition is that atheism is a propositional claim that God does not exist.
So where in that does that entail naturalism?
Because if God does not exist, denying the Christian God, which is the claim that God is the creator and sustainer of the entire universe, you remove that God, and the universe is God independent, which entails that the universe is naturalistic only.
No, that doesn't follow.
That doesn't follow?
Okay. So can I be an atheist and a Platonist about numbers? I could literally do that, and I could believe that numbers aren't strictly natural.
Yeah, the same way a Christian can claim to be a believer in Christ and a homosexual. We have delusional people in the world.
So in your definition, strictly you stated that it's a lack of belief in God, or it's just an unbelief in God.
No.
And you said that...
No, my definition is that it's a claim that there is no God. A proposition,
correct. So,
right.
So now you said that, okay, that means that the universe doesn't have a creator, sure. And then you said that means everything in the universe must be natural, that the atheist must hold to that. That doesn't follow. You have to demonstrate that.
Okay, I'm gonna try to do this again. What I presented was a true dichotomy, implicitly, a true dichotomy. Either the universe is emblematic of ultimate intentional design by Yahweh, its creator, entailing a supernatural worldview, or not, meaning the universe is only natural. So if you deny one, you have the other. You deny one, you have the other.
That doesn't follow. You're not tracking. I just showed you a counter example that you can be a Platonist about certain things.
And I told you that that person does not exist.
All right, so what's the contradiction?
I'm going to define the contradiction from my worldview.
What's the contradiction?
P is that you are acting as though you can use logic, you can use language, you can pretend as though there is consciousness without acknowledging the grounding for these things, which is not P. So we have the P and not P right there in my worldview.
So no, because I gave you the example of being a Platonist about certain things.
And I rejected it.
By what basis?
From my worldview.
You're just saying from my worldview, you're not providing the justification for your worldview. In your worldview,
that's because you think that justification is neutral. It's not neutral. Everything.
You just tell me where the justification comes from. You don't tell me what the justification is.
Everything is interpreted through a worldview lens. Everything.
You're telling me where it's coming from your worldview. All right, I'm asking for the justification. Are you tracking?
My worldview. Just told you.
All right, I know where it's coming from. It's coming from your worldview. Tell me what the justification is.
I just told you.
If I tell you I have something in my backyard, I'm telling you where it's at. I'm not telling you what that thing is. You told me that your justification is from your worldview. You tell me where it's at. So justify that. What's the justification in your worldview?
I'm going to tell you again. The P and not P in my worldview is that. What?
I'm not asking for the contradiction. Are you even tracking, bro? I asked for the justification.
For what?
The contradiction. You already provided that earlier.
Justification for what?
I'm asking for the justification that you can't be a Platonist within your worldview and be an atheist.
Platonism is the belief that there are immaterial forms that are reflected in the natural world. You can't be an atheist and a Platonist.
Wait, that are reflected in the natural world?
Because I'm defining atheism as the denial of God's existence and a...
So I can believe in other supernatural things. It doesn't strictly have to be God.
No, buddy. I want you to understand something in this entire conversation. If you deny the existence of Yahweh, who is the ground of all being and all supernatural beings and everything, you deny the rest of all of supernatural, everything. In my worldview, it doesn't follow. It doesn't follow by what standard?
Because just because I deny your God, the Christian God, does not mean that I can't hold non-natural things.
Okay, so I asked you by what standard, and then you said I'm not asking about you. I'm asking you by what standard.
So analytically, atheism you define as a proposition that you don't believe in God.
No. That's not what I said. Atheism is the denial of all gods. That's what I said.
No, that's literally not what you said. That's a completely brand new thing that you just said.
Oh boy. I'm glad that I recorded this so I can repeat the video. So now I'm going to correct myself if you didn't hear me earlier. Atheism is the denial of the supernatural, meaning all gods don't exist.
That's just a completely different
definition. So now deal with that definition, because it doesn't seem that you were tracking earlier when I said that atheism is a proposition that there are no gods. Okay, so the atheism I'm negating is the atheism that states there are no gods.
Replay the clip.
Huh?
Replay the clip.
It's recording right now, so I can't replay it. It's going to be replayed when it's posted. So I want you to stick to what I'm saying now. If you heard me say earlier that atheism is a denial of my God, I'm going to rephrase my claim. Atheism is the denial of all gods. Okay?
You literally said that.
Now I'm going to, bro. Didn't I define Yahweh as the ground of all supernatural beings?
You said that often.
Okay, so if I say that if you deny Yahweh, you're denying all supernatural beings and all the supernatural, how is that different from what I'm saying right now? You see, you're the one who's not tracking, buddy. You're the one who's not tracking. So let me rephrase what I said earlier, because you didn't hear what I said. I said to deny my God is to deny the entire supernatural, everything supernatural, which entails naturalism. That's what I'm saying. So if that's not what you're doing, then you're just wasting your time.
First of all, you're just analytically defining as a lack of belief in your God as also a denial of other supernatural things. And you can analytically define that.
There you go again.
That's idiosyncratic.
You're not tracking. I am not defining atheism as a lack of belief. I'm defining atheism as a denial of God. You just said that I'm defining atheism as a lack of belief. You see, you're not tracking. You're not listening to what I'm saying.
So did you even listen to what I just said?
You said that I'm defining atheism as a lack of belief in my God, which does not entail that other gods don't exist.
Is that the only thing you call on? Because that wasn't the crux of what I said, bro. The crux of what I said is that you're analytically defining as unbelief in God as also a denial of all supernatural things.
No. There you go again. There you go again. Now, this is how conversations with me end when you put words in my mouth. I never said atheism is a lack of belief in my God or any other gods.
I said
atheism. Unbelief. Okay, let me use the word unbelief. I never said that. I said atheism is a denial, a rejection of all gods. I'm glad you left, bro, because I was just about to kick you. For everybody who comes on my page, if any of you continuously put words in my mouth, that's how the conversation ends. That's how it ends. That's how it ends. I never said once that atheism is a lack of belief. I never said once that atheism is a disbelief. I never said any of that once in this conversation. I said atheism is a rejection, a denial of God's existence. And that definition is supported by the Encyclopedia of Philosophy. That is the definition I'm using. I do not care about lack of belief atheism because that is a psychological report of your level of persuasion. I don't care if you're unconvinced. I'm unconvinced about a lot of things. That does not entail that they don't exist, which means that lacking belief in something in the grand scheme of things does not matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. So let me get back to what I was saying. I have to actually give the sources because there were people who came on my page, my YouTube page, literally saying that the definition of atheism I'm giving is false, and there is nothing in the world that supports the definition I'm giving. What is atheism? I'm gonna pull up all of the dictionaries that I have, which support two definitions of atheism. Let me see if I have it here. Atheism. Okay, so it's not in this file. So as I'm looking for it, let me pause my video before. All right, so I have 10 dictionary definitions, regular dictionary definitions for atheism. Regular dictionaries, like you can just go and look up dictionaries like Merriam-Webster, Oxford English Dictionary, Cambridge English Dictionary, Collins English Dictionary, Dictionary.com, American Heritage Dictionary, Macmillan Dictionary, Longman Dictionary, Webster's Dictionary, Random House, Unabridged Dictionary. These are the 10 dictionaries I'm going to read from on what atheism is and what atheism means. Because this seems to be a universal thing where when you define atheism as anything other than a lack of belief in God, atheists jump on your head and say, hey, you got atheism wrong. So I'm going to read from these dictionaries, and then I'm going to read from philosophical dictionaries about what atheism means so that people can understand where I'm coming from. So Merriam-Webster Dictionary of Atheism is defined as a lack of belief or strong disbelief in the existence of a god or any gods. The other one is the Oxford Dictionary. It says disbelief in or denial of the existence of God or gods. The other one is Cambridge English Dictionary. The fact of not believing in any gods or God, or the belief that no god or gods exist. Collins English Dictionary. The other one is disbelief in or denial of the existence of God or gods. Okay, I'm just going to read 4. That's number 4. All right, now the philosophical dictionaries. So Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, March 22, 2022. Atheism is the proposition that God does not exist. The other one is Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Atheism is the view that there is no God. Routledge Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Atheism is the position that affirms the non-existence of God. It proposes positive disbelief rather than mere suspension of belief. Cambridge Dictionary of Philosophy. The view that there are no gods. Positive view. And the last one I'm going to read from Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy. Defines atheism as the belief that there is no God. Positive belief. So when you people hear me say, everybody on YouTube who will hear this video, everybody on TikTok who's listening right now, when you hear I say that atheism is a propositional claim that God does not exist, I am not making this up. I am not creating a definition. I am not creating something from my head. It is a recognized definition of what atheism is: a propositional belief. Propositional belief. So when someone says I'm wrong with how I define atheism, your beef is not with me. Your beef is with the dictionary. Your beef is with the dictionary. I'm just appealing to the dictionary and stating what atheism is and how I am defining atheism with authoritative support. And I'm saying that atheism is false. The propositional claim God does not exist is false. Now, a lack of belief in God, lack theism, lack of belief in God, atheism, that cannot be false by definition because it's a level of persuasion. It's a level of persuasion. It's a psychological mental state. It's something that someone has. It's a truth. It's something that is true about reality. There are people in the world who are not convinced that there's a God. That cannot be false by definition. So I'm not talking about that form of atheism. But don't say to me that atheism as defined, uh, atheism defined as a propositional claim that God does not exist. Don't say that that form of atheism is not true or it's false or it doesn't exist, because you'd be going against dictionaries, and that's not something that you want to do. You know, that's not something you want to do, because words have meaning, and those meanings matter. All right, so we have someone named. I don't think I can even say his name. I don't think I can say your name on here.
Uh,
Hello, can you hear me?
yes, I can. Hold on, give me 1 second there.
Hey, what's wrong with Ellie? Okay.
Okay. All right, what's up?
Yeah, so the atheism that I'm saying is false is the other form of atheism, which is a propositional claim that God does not exist. There's no way that anyone can prove that, no way that anyone can know that, and therefore it's false. The atheism that's just a lack of belief in God is not false, because it's a psychological mental state that someone may have or may not have, where they are simply unconvinced that God exists.
All right, I see. I was listening to you just a bit before this, and you went to the dictionaries and whatnot. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But how do you know it to be unverifiable?
How do I know it to be unverified?
Yeah.
How do I know that it cannot be proven that God does not exist?
Yes.
Because that would require you to have all knowledge. That there are God independent contingencies in the universe, something that you would not be able to prove. I can't prove that there is a God independent thing in the universe. No one can.
I don't think I get exactly what you mean. You said that you would need all knowledge, but I do need all knowledge.
For someone to say there is no God, they would have had to examine, they would have had to research, they would have had to evaluate every form of evidence that has ever been presented about God to then make the claim they know with absolute certainty there is no God. I don't think that anyone can do that, nor has anyone done that. And if anyone, appeals to the scientific method, the methodology itself is limited because it's based on a limited methodology or principle called induction, where you evaluate a limited supply of information, and then you draw a conclusion from that, and you generalize from that. That is why science is open for revision and open for change, because of what it's based on, induction.
Then what about philosophical proofs?
Now those can definitely disprove the existence of anything. if you could derive a contradiction within the Christian worldview on its ultimate level, then you could prove like you could prove that there are no square circles because it's a logical contradiction. It's a logical impossibility.
So it is. So it is provable.
The God of the Bible, I would not say is possible to prove logically that he doesn't exist, because there are no logical contradictions within his nature, essence, or revelation that could, demonstrate that there is a logical contradiction. So it would be something that's not there and therefore can't be proved.
What do I want to do about this? Where do I want to take this conversation?
Are you going to bring the problem of evil?
Probably not. I don't think the logical problem of evil is entirely sound. I don't think it can be used to definitively prove that God does not exist. The evidential problem of evil is stronger, makes a stronger case, but it doesn't prove that God doesn't exist. So you'd have to somehow find some kind of contradiction within the attributes of the Christian God, or something of like.
Yeah.
Is God the creator of the universe?
Yes, he is.
So if I showed you why I believe that the universe was not created and couldn't have a creator, that would be a contradiction, and it would mean that God doesn't exist.
If you could show that, that would be really, really interesting. And yes, you would falsify the Christian God if you could show that the universe was not created.
So does change exist? Right? Does change exist in our world? Do things in our world change? That's like this.
I would answer that by saying that yes, things change in our world because God sustains all of reality and is the grounding for all change in reality.
Okay, so did God create change? Is the grounding of change?
God created the universe, and the universe being created is rather necessarily a contingent thing, and every contingent thing is limited to time and space, and being limited to time and space will entail that you have change.
Let me say this. Change always existed. Change had to have always existed, because if change never existed, then we would have a state that doesn't have change, which somehow changed, because change does exist.
Is that a scientific claim?
That's a philosophical.
Okay, based on what?
Based on we agree that change does exist.
I agree that change exists because God created the universe. So I don't say that change exists as a singular thing without any reason behind it. I don't think that change is a brute fact, something that is there without a reason.
So change didn't always exist?
Exactly. I would say that change didn't always exist, and that logically prior to God creating the universe, there was no change, because in the essence and nature of God, he's immutable and without change.
But if change didn't exist, something would have had to occur that caused change to exist. So you need a change to bring change into existence.
Say that again?
Which is a contradiction. You need a change to bring change into existence, which is a contradiction.
I wouldn't think that would be a contradiction. I would say that God displaying his power to bring something into existence that was not there before would not entail a contradiction. It would just mean that God acted and brought something into existence. I don't see how it follows that it would be a contradiction. But maybe you can clear it up for me. Go ahead.
Sorry, I had to do something really big. I didn't get to hear your point. What were you saying?
Yeah, I was saying that God displaying and expressing his power to create and hence bringing change into existence does not entail a contradiction. The contradiction would be P and not P. Like God doesn't change and God changes in the same way, in the same sense. It would be a contradiction.
I'm not saying that God changes. I'm saying that change conceptually, or whatever the case may be, must have always existed. If it didn't always exist, then change would have had to come into existence somehow, which is a change. That's not possible without change. Like, you're saying there's change, there's no change. Okay, let me go back to.
Okay, so you think I'm defining change as change originating out of change prior to change existing?
Yeah, something along those
Okay,
lines.
so that is not what I'm saying. That would be a contradiction. I'm not saying that change came out of change prior to change existing. I'm saying change came out of the power and plan of God prior to change existing. So it would be a misrepresentation to say the other thing, which I didn't say, nor am I saying. But that's pretty good, though. That's pretty good.
My bad, huh? I'm still not entirely clear on what you mean.
No, look, bro. I am conceding it is a contradiction. If I were to say change came out of change prior to change existing, that's a contradiction. It's like me saying God created Himself, which would mean that
Right.
God didn't exist prior to Him existing, or God didn't exist prior to Him creating Himself. That would be equivalent. That's a contradiction. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying that a different source other than change brought change into existence, which would not be a contradiction. The other thing would be a contradiction, not what I'm saying.
But if some source that wasn't change brought change into existence, then that would be a change. That change could not exist if change didn't exist.
Okay, now let me tell you how that could be a contradiction. If I were saying that out of the thing that is not change came change, out of the thing that is characteristically non-changing came something that is changing, from the essence of the thing that is non-changing or immutable, then we would have a contradiction, which is what every other worldview with reference to their natured entity has. In that when you look at the ancient Near East and their gods define creation as an extension of their flesh, an extension of their parts, an extension of their tongue, their eyes, their tears, etc., where everything is a derivative expression of the essence and nature of the God Himself. If I was defining change in that way, where everything we see in the world is an extension of the essence of God, and everything in the world is change, and now I say that God is non-changing and immutable, that's a contradiction. But that's not what the Christian worldview says. What we say is that the nature and essence of God is non-changing, and His will and His plan to create a world where there exists change is where change flowed from. And there is a change and expression in the mind and plan of God because we see it in creation.
That's actually, all right. I think I'm getting it now.
Yeah, it's all about having knowledge about theology, man. Once you know theology, Christian theology, these questions that are very difficult questions when I first saw them, you see how they clear things up.
So you're saying that God exists eternally, and He eternally willed for creation to exist.
Oh no, I wouldn't use those exact words because if I would dig myself in a hole if I did that. Now, what I would say, and I'm sticking with the literature I've read on this, is that there is something called temporal order and logical order. Temporal order in theology and logical order. In that there is no temporal order in the decree and plan of God, but there is a logical order in that prior to creating the world, God had a plan to create the world. Not temporal order where we say before He created the world, He had a plan to create the world. We say logical order so that we don't use the word temporal or time when there was no time. That would be a contradiction. So what we say is logical order. So God's plan being in His mind and His mind being eternal, He decides logically when to bring that about. And when he brings that about, we experience it as being part of that creation.
All right. So did this begin at some point?
Yeah, the universe, yeah, began at some point. Yeah.
So we went from a state where this thing did not exist. I can't go back to this because you already cleared that. Oh, what is it I'm getting? There's some issue here, and I cannot put my finger on it for life.
I think you'll figure it out eventually. Because what I'm saying is everything in the Christian worldview that I think is coherent, and if somebody points out something that seems to be incoherent to me, I do what I've always done. I go back to my library, I do some more reading to see if there's a reconciliation to what has been brought to me that I don't have an answer for. And how I answer this particular question, because I've heard it before from my studies, is that what we experience, what we see, as we experience change, as we experience age, and I think it's the second law of thermodynamics that things wear out. What we experience is a derivative expression of the will of God, not a derivative expression of God's essence, which would be a contradiction.
I don't know what that is.
Derivative expression, something derived from something else.
Oh yeah. I know what you mean. I'm looking at this guy in the comments. I have no idea what he's talking about. But anyways, you're saying that something outside of change brought change into existence?
Wait, something outside of change brought change into existence. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The question would be, is the source that change came out of something that is mutable in and of itself, which would entail that change came out of change, meaning the claim is before there was ever change, change came out of change. That's a contradiction. But the claim is before there was ever change, there was God, who is by definition non-changing and eternal, and he, from his power and his will. Yeah.
Yes, you just said before change.
Logically, prior to change ever existing, there was a being that is immutable, because we would define the universe as ever changing. Yes, so before the universe existed, logically prior to the universe existing, God determined to create the universe from his will, from his power, and we now experience change. But there's no change in the being itself.
Isn't the statement before change logically contradictory? Before is a time word, right? You can't have a before change because the word before implies that there was a change.
That's why I use the word logically prior or logical order.
Oh, you were saying that.
Yeah, logically prior or not referencing temporal order. And this is something you can actually read up, the difference between logical order and temporal order. I could even bring up the robot that I have here, in that this is something that is accepted even in philosophy, where there's a distinction between logical order and temporal order.
So you're saying that there is no before change, so change always exists?
Oh no, I'm not saying that, because if I say there is no before change, then I'm saying that change always existed, which would contradict the Christian worldview that God, always existing, has always been a changing entity, when in the Bible he says that he is never changing or unchanging, immutable. That's what
I'm not getting at the idea that God is changing or he's not changing. I'm just asking whether or not change always existed. Because if change didn't always exist, then we would have a state without change that somehow changed, which would be a contradiction. It seems to me that change must have always existed.
And I'm going to say again, we have a contradiction if I am saying that out of something that is changing, change was brought into existence, which means that before change was brought into existence, there was no change, but change came out of change. That's a contradiction. But I'm saying that change came out of something that is characteristically non-changing, and it did not come out of the essence of the thing. It came out of the will and desire of the thing.
So you're saying that change came from the will and desire of X?
Yes.
So change came into existence?
Right.
But change can't come into existence, because to come into existence is a change. To go from not existing to existing is a change. That's a contradiction.
If the source itself is change.
The source, I don't want to be like blunt or anything, but the source doesn't exactly matter in this case, right? If we have X, whatever it may be, you're saying that change originates from that. But if change originates from that, then we had a state where no change existed that changed into one that change did exist. Like, that's a contradiction. It's just not possible.
I don't think it's a contradiction. I would like for you to put it in a syllogism for me.
Syllogistic? Okay.
Yeah, syllogistically, where we have the P and the not P. Let me write it down. Hold on. Because I don't see the contradiction, and I think that when I write it down, I'm going to see it.
It'll be clear, maybe. Yeah.
All right. Go ahead. P.
Okay, so premise 1, change originated from X. Right? And premise 2 would be that change originating from X implies a change. Is this even right? Change originated from X. Change originating from X implies a change. Therefore, is he really there? Therefore,
yeah,
a state where change did not exist changed. This is a terrible syllogism. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm not even gonna say that it is. I'm just gonna say I don't see how it follows.
Like, this is a terrible syllogism. I'm not gonna lie. I have no idea how to syllogize.
Hey, mysterious galaxy, be friendly, man. Be friendly. I'm not cooking him. I'm not. We're just having a conversation. All right. So, P1, change originated from X. P2, change originating from X implies a change. And then conclusion.
That's just not possible. All right. So, let's say that there is this state X where change does not exist. For change to come into existence, we would have went from a state that didn't have any change to a state that has change. That difference is a change. So we're saying that a state where change does not exist change. So change exists in a state without change. That's not possible.
Wait. Let me see. Let me see how I can syllogize this. Wait. Pull up my keyboard. Let me try to syllogize this how I think I could clear it up. Oh, come on. Why is this freezing on me now? God damn. All right, I'm going to write it down. Okay. P1. Wait. Have you ever heard of modus ponens and modus tollens?
Yes, I know the terms. I'm not 100% certain on what they mean.
All right, so modus ponens is basically affirming the antecedent. Modus tollens is denying the consequent. So modus ponens, if it rains outside, then it's wet outside. P1. P2, it rained outside. Conclusion, therefore it's wet outside.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So you affirm the antecedent. So I'm going to see if I could put this in the modus ponens. P1, but it will actually be a modus tollens where I deny the consequent. All right, so if there was a time when, you know what, this is very difficult. I can't even put in the syllogism either. I can't do it. Not right now. I'm going to have to look this up some more. All right, so I would say that the act of creating the universe The act itself entails a change. The act itself entails a change, which would be the origination of change itself, not the act itself being a change, bringing change into existence. That's what I would say. That's what I would say, because that would escape the notion of change coming out of change. I would just say that the act itself that brought the universe into existence is change coming into existence, not change coming out of change.
But change can't come into existence. That's the problem.
Okay, now that is something that we can look into. Let me see if the robot can help me. Because I like to think that the robot is more intelligent sometimes. Hey, ChatGPT, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. I'm right here. What's on your mind today?
Does the statement change came into existence entail a contradiction? If yes, tell me how.
It does have a bit of a paradoxical vibe if you think about it closely. For change to come into existence, there would have to be a time before change existed. But if nothing changed before that moment, then how could we shift from a state of no change to change? That shift is itself a change. So the statement ends up implying that change must have always been possible, because the appearance of change itself would be a change. In short, you can't have a beginning of change without change.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
All right, so I'm gonna throw something into the equation, ChatGPT. In Christian theology, where we define God as immutable and without change, and we say that from His will, not His essence, He created the world, which brought change into existence. Does that imply a contradiction?
Not necessarily, but it's a nuanced distinction. In that theological framework, God's essence is unchanging. God is timelessly constant. But when we say God wills something like creating the world, that's not seen as God changing. Rather, it's the created order, time, space, and change that begins. In that sense, change is part of creation, not part of God's nature. So from that viewpoint, there's no contradiction. The changeless God is the source of a reality in which change for the first time can unfold.
Okay. So that's what I was getting at, where I did not see a contradiction in what I was saying, and I think the robot cleared it up for me. But what I said to it first, you do have a case where you have a contradiction if I remove God from the equation and I'm saying, hey, change came into existence, which is a change, which would imply change has always been there, which is a contradiction.
But still, you think that God brought change into existence. That's the same contradiction. You just brought God into the equation, but I don't think that fixes it.
The reason why I think it does is because I'm making a distinction between the nature and essence of God being unchanging and the will of God that brings change into existence, which are two different things.
But I don't think this has anything to do with God, right? From a purely logical standpoint, it seems to me that change could not have ever been brought into existence because to bring change into existence requires change, which is a contradiction. I don't think it matters where it comes from or whatever the case may be. Like, it's still a contradiction.
Yeah, you're going to keep on seeing a contradiction because you're reasoning about this with the exclusion of God. If you put God in the equation, I don't think you have a contradiction. And I'm gonna prove it to you. Hey ChatGPT. If we are reasoning about change coming into existence without any reference to the God of Christianity, wouldn't that entail a contradiction?
If you're reasoning purely philosophically, then yes, it can be seen as a contradiction. To say change came into existence implies a shift from a state of no change to change. But if there was truly no change beforehand, no movement or difference, then what would cause or allow the transition? The very act of shifting from no change to change is itself a change. So without some external grounding or timeless reality, the idea loops in on itself. In other words, without a precondition or context, it's tricky to explain how change begins, because that start would require some change already.
And if we add God to the conversation when we reason about these things, we would, as you said before, not have a contradiction. Is that correct?
Exactly. In that theological reasoning, God is the unchanging, eternal foundation outside of time and change. Since God doesn't undergo change but wills creation, that provides a source or cause for change to begin. Thus, with that framework, you avoid the contradiction, because change can arise from a timeless, unchanging source rather than out of nowhere.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So, yes, you have a case if you remove God from the equation, deadly. But if you put God in the equation, you don't have a contradiction. So I'm putting God in there, and you're not. So both of us are saying opposites, and we're going to keep saying the opposite. But this was fun, though.
I really, I just don't get it at all. How does, it doesn't answer it doesn't solve the issue.
But you do know that you not understanding it does not entail it's false. That would be an appeal to incredulity.
I do know that.
Yeah.
That would be an argument from incredulity, right?
Yes. The appeal to incredulity fallacy. Where not understanding something doesn't entail it's false. You know, I don't understand calculus at all, for that matter. That doesn't mean it's false.
That's true. But bringing this into the conversation, like you're saying that God is eternal and God somehow creates change. It's the same contradiction. It's the same thing. God is eternal and God creates change, but change can't be created. It has to have always existed. Has to.
And that is something, my friend, I don't think that you could demonstrate from a theological perspective, theological standpoint, because I'm arguing about this theologically, about the essence and nature of God. And I even conceded to you that if Christian theology stated that God is unchanging and out of his unchanging essence, he brought about change, that's a contradiction. But that's not what Christianity says. It actually says that out of his will and power, he brought about change, which is the entire universe itself.
But that's the exact problem. You're saying brought about change. Brought about change means that there was a state with no change, that changed. That's just contradictory. That's just contradictory, regardless of whoever did it, however it was done. It's logically contradictory. It is necessarily false.
And I told you why I didn't see a contradiction. And what I just said, I can bet if I threw this at the robot, it's not going to say that I have a contradiction.
I don't agree with the robot. I don't agree with the robot.
I mean, we're just gonna have to, bro. What we're gonna have to do, I think we're at an impasse where I can't convince you otherwise because you can't see it, and you're not gonna convince me otherwise because of all the reading I've done in the issue, and I don't see a contradiction. It's right now we're having a psychological conversation about our level of persuasion. You're not convinced that it's not a contradiction, and I'm not convinced that it is a contradiction. We're just stuck right there. We're just gonna keep going in circles.
I just can't see how you could demonstrate that this is not a contradiction. What you're saying is that God is eternal and he wills change into existence. But change coming into existence is itself a contradiction. And we agreed on this.
Yeah. ChatGPT. God being eternal and timeless and willing change into existence, is that a contradiction?
It's a subtle distinction, but within that theological reasoning, it's not considered a contradiction. The idea is that God is outside of time, timeless, unchanging in essence, but can will or create the temporal order. From the timeless perspective, God's act of creating isn't a change in God. Instead, it's the initiation of change in the created world. From our point of view, there's a before and after, but from God's perspective, there's no change in his essence. So it's a philosophical move that separates God's timeless nature from the unfolding of change within creation.
And would you say that we would have a contradiction if, in the theological reasoning, the Christian said that from the unchanging essence of God, he brought about change, which would entail a contradiction?
Yes, that would be a contradiction. If change arose directly from the unchanging essence, it would imply a shift in that essence, meaning it wasn't truly unchanging. To avoid that contradiction, theological reasoning usually separates God's essence, unchanging, from God's will or action. In other words, the change happens in creation, not inside God's own essence. That distinction keeps it consistent.
Okay, so what we're going to have to do, Dudley, is we're going to stick with the strict definition of what a contradiction is. A contradiction is when you have A and not A, the same time, the same category, and the same meaning. Meaning that a contradiction has to meet three criteria: temporal condition, categorical condition, and semantic condition. And this can be verified by the robot as well. If you say that it's a contradiction, you would have to show where we have an A and not A, the same sense, the same category, the same meaning. I don't think you can do that, but you can try.
I don't think I can do it. Right? You're saying that God wills change into existence, right?
Right.
Right. Willing change into existence implies both change and not change, because to go from a state with no change to a state with change is a change. So you're affirming that change exists while saying that change doesn't exist. That is a contradiction. That's A and not A.
I wouldn't say that, because I have demonstrated earlier that the essence and nature of God is unchanging, but the will and act of God that initiates change is not a state where the will of God is somehow contradictory to his essence. I think I said that earlier. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show from the robot again. I don't think you're going to accept what the robot says, but I think it's very, very interesting what it says when it deals with this, because it's what I've been saying all along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT, would you agree with me that a contradiction has to meet three criteria: the temporal criteria, the categorical, and the semantic, where it has to have an A and not A, or P and not P, the same time, the same category, the same meaning?
Yes, that's a pretty standard way to define a contradiction. For something to truly be a contradiction, you need that direct logical clash. The same thing, in the same sense, at the same time, cannot both be and not be.
Now tell me why the Christian reasoning or the theological reasoning about God bringing about change is not a contradiction, in that it does not meet those criteria.
Sure, in the theological reasoning, they aren't saying God's essence is changing while simultaneously not changing. Instead, they say God's essence is unchanging, and change occurs in creation, which is a different category. There's no point where they claim God is changing and not changing in the same sense. Also, it's not at the same time. God is timeless, and change begins with creation. And semantically, they're careful to distinguish between God's essence and God's action. So the criteria, same time, same category, same meaning, aren't violated.
Okay.
Like, I think both you and the AI are answering a completely different question. I'm not talking about a change in God. This has nothing to do with God. The idea of change coming into existence itself is logically contradictory, no matter who or what or whatever it comes from.
Yeah, that's because you're reasoning from this from a purely philosophical perspective, with the exclusion of God.
No. Even if we include God, it doesn't change anything.
I think it does.
How would it change anything? What could it change?
It changes everything, because with God in the equation, we have an eternal, immutable grounding for existence itself, and existence is a chain of causation, which implies change. What grounds all of that? What originates all of that? Is it your position that everything that exists right now has always existed?
I think that the universe always existed.
All right.
It seems to me that change always existed.
All right. So let's use that. Is the universe a natural phenomenon?
Yes.
What methodology do we use to study the natural world?
Science.
All right. And does the consensus in the scientific community say the universe had a beginning, or the universe is eternal?
There is no consensus.
ChatGPT, what is the consensus in the scientific community about the origin of the universe, whether or not it is eternal or created? Sorry, eternal or had a beginning?
No worries. The prevailing scientific consensus is that the universe had a beginning. The Big Bang Theory, which is widely supported by evidence like cosmic microwave background radiation and the observed expansion of space, indicates the universe began around 13.8 billion years ago. Now, whether something existed before that, like a previous state or multiverse, is still speculative, but in terms of the known universe as we observe it, it's not eternal in the past, it had a beginning.
The Big Bang can be used as evidence to support the positive claim that the universe has a beginning, but the theory in and of itself does not claim that the universe has a beginning. The Big Bang Theory doesn't say anything about whether the universe began to exist or didn't begin to exist. There are other models of the universe, like the Big Bones Theory or the Big Crunch, which show that the universe is eternal. I don't think there's any major or literal consensus on whether the universe verifiably began or was eternal or whatever the case may be. I do think that the universe, well, that's scientifically speaking. Philosophically speaking, I definitely think the universe is eternal.
So, you would say that your conclusion has no verification or support from the consensus of the scientific community, right? The universe is eternal.
There is evidence and support of it. I named two theories: Big Bones, Big Crunch.
Big Bones and what else?
Big Crunch.
Okay. ChatGPT, the Big Bounce and Big Crunch theory, which proposes that the universe is eternal. How supported are these theories in the consensus of the scientific community?
The Big Bounce, or cyclic models where the universe goes through endless expansions and contractions, are interesting ideas, but they're not the leading view. While they've been explored and debated, current evidence, like the cosmic microwave background and the accelerating expansion of the universe, fits best with a universe that started with a singular beginning. The Big Bounce ideas are more speculative and face challenges, like how to avoid singularities or explain entropy. So while some researchers explore them, they're not the mainstream consensus. The standard Big Bang with a beginning is still the most supported.
So what is the evidence that those theories propose or give to the table in the discussion about the origin of the universe? What is the evidence for the Big Bounce idea and the other idea? What is the evidence? Is it just speculative, or do they have evidence?
The Big Bounce or cyclic ideas are often motivated by theoretical work in quantum gravity or string cosmology, where they try to avoid the singularity of the Big Bang. Some models suggest that quantum effects or a repulsive force at extreme densities could lead to a prior contraction, bounce, and then expansion. But these remain largely theoretical. There's no direct observational evidence like a signal from a prior cycle that we've detected. Instead, these models are attempts to solve theoretical puzzles like what happens at extreme conditions, rather than being directly evidenced by observations. So they're speculative frameworks awaiting empirical support.
Okay, so these theories have no observational evidence, no empirical support. They are just speculative. So these are what you have, Deadly. Speculative notions about the universe's origin.
Sure, scientifically speaking, philosophically speaking, I think there is a strong case for an eternal universe, 100%.
That's why I try not to, because the Big Bang Theory, I can actually accept the Big Bang Theory and say that God did the banging. It doesn't entail that my God doesn't exist. But the other versions, it actually does entail that my God doesn't exist. And those other versions are versions that are not supported. They're literally beliefs that people have, speculative beliefs that people have. So the question becomes, how do they know that, the universe has always existed? How do they know that? There's no way of literally answering that question with absolute certainty. And that, I'm sure if I ask you, how do you know with absolute certainty that you could not be wrong that the universe has always existed?
How do I know with absolute certainty? I don't think there's anything you can know with absolute certainty.
Does that mean that you don't know that you exist with absolute certainty?
No. Besides that, right? Rene Descartes. Yes. I think, therefore I am. Yes.
Have you? You seem to be someone who reads a lot of philosophy. Have you read the critiques from Immanuel Kant and Bertrand Russell of the cogito?
I have not, unfortunately.
It's very interesting, bro. It really makes one wonder if they truly exist when you read the criticism, because in Immanuel Kant's critique of the cogito, what he says is that Descartes makes a distinction between appearance and substance, in that appearance are those things that are not objects of experience, and substance are those things which are objects of experience. So this would be a substance, but my consciousness, my joy, my peace, all these things not being objects of experience, you would call those appearances. So Kant's argument against the cogito is that in order for Descartes to know with certainty that he exists, or that the I am is a substance and not an appearance, he would have to step outside of his consciousness and observe the am, observe the I am, observe the substance, and hence have his existence be a part of observable, objective existence. But because he couldn't do that, Kant does not grant the conclusion of the cogito in that I think, therefore I am. He doesn't grant the therefore. He says the therefore is a paralogism, which is a logical fallacy where you equivocate between the distinction of appearance and substance. It's very, very interesting. I think you should look into it.
That's so crazy. What? That's so crazy.
It's very interesting. And Bertrand Russell, he says that Descartes doesn't even have the I. All he has is that, let me tell you, all he has is that there are thoughts, but the I is not a datum of experience, therefore he cannot say with absolute certainty that the I exists. All you can say is that there are thoughts. It was fun. It was very fun reading those guys, but if you have no grounding, external grounding, you really put yourself in a situation where, have you ever heard of solipsism?
Mm-hmm.
You put yourself in a situation where you're wondering if you're being deceived by a demon, or your mind is the only mind that exists, and this guy right here talking to you is a part of that mind and not really a thing that exists.
This is so crazy.
It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. Yeah. So when someone says, I don't think I have absolute certainty about anything, I always ask them, does that include your existence? And then they immediately says, well, no, not that. But how do you have absolute certainty about your existence? Is it based on your observation? If it's based on your observation, but your observation could be mistaken, then it would logically follow that you could be mistaken about your own existence.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's just a whole lot of skepticism, man. And Descartes was a skeptic, and he was trying to figure out, what can I know with certainty? And then we have the words, I think, therefore I am, which is not even granted in the argument.
Ridiculous. That's actually so ridiculous. That's so crazy.
Yeah. But I really like this conversation, man. And as I said, I think we're at an impasse. I don't think that I'm going to convince you. I don't think I can convince you that I don't have a contradiction. And if you reject Christianity based on that, then, I guess you have a reasonable conclusion to reject Christianity on that. But a Christian who has read the literature will tell you, hey, man, I think you're mistaken. This is how I see it. And it's not a contradiction. But it won't guarantee that you'll be convinced otherwise.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah. Try to be as fair as I can, man. All
right, it was fun, bro. I'll catch you.
Oh my God. Come back sometime, all right?
Maybe, hopefully.
Blessings.
All right.
Yeah, that was an amazing conversation. But I actually have some documents about what I was telling him about the cogito, Cartesian certainty, and I want to pull that up because the first time I heard about it was in a debate that I was watching with T Jump, and he tried to justify his certainty in his existence, and then from that ground laws of logic, law of identity, uniformity of nature, and all these things, and then concluded, see, I don't need God because I can have knowledge and certainty without him, therefore he's not needed. So what I want to do is I want to pull up, where is it? Where's my document? Oh boy. I'm gonna have to type it. I have so many documents on this thing. Hold on. For everybody on YouTube and everybody on TikTok, give me a sec. I want to pull this up. Oh, here we are. Cogito and T-Jump. All right, so I want to put the argument in a syllogism from from Immanuel Kant's criticism. So here it is. All right, let me see if I have it here. Actually, no. No, I'm going too far, going too fast. All right, exhaustive presentation. Here we are. All right, so scroll down and okay, here we are. So we have P1, P2, and conclusion. So in Kant's critique, he says that to put the I think, therefore I am in a syllogism, it would go like this. Premise 1, everything that thinks is a substance. Premise 2, I think. Conclusion, therefore I am a substance. Remember, appearance and substance. Substance being an object of experience or object of observable experience. So if you are a substance, then you exist, is the argument. Kant says the major premise, P1, is false when applied to the I. The word substance is being used ambiguously. In one sense, for objects in the world, and in another sense, for the transcendental subject. This is the equivocation fallacy. And an example would be, imagine you are watching a movie and you say, I am watching the movie. You are certain that there is watching happening, but you cannot conclude from this certainty alone that there is a permanent, invisible, movie-watching soul that exists outside the movie theater. All you really know is that the experience is unified under the I. You don't get a metaphysical soul for free. So what he's saying is that you have the I think because the I is the unifier of the experience, but you don't have the I am because you don't have the I am as an object of experience itself, making it a substance, and only substance exists. Only the substance exists. So it is not entailed in the argument. Wow. Okay. All right, so let me see how long I've been on here. Wow, an hour and 14 minutes. Oh, guys, I gotta get out of here. Damn. But I am gonna go back to my library and do some reading about the objection that Dudley brought up about change and it being from a logical perspective, a contradiction if change came out of change. And the reason why I agree with the scientific consensus that the universe is not eternal is because it is consistent with my worldview. I use my worldview as the standard. Because if anyone, has read about the models of cosmology, then you learn that there was a time when the prevailing model on cosmology was that the universe was eternal and that the universe was static or steady until it was discovered that the universe was expanding. Even if the consensus was the opposite. If the consensus was this, that the universe is eternal, I, as a Christian, would have said, no, it's not. Because my worldview states that God is the ultimate unifying causal natured entity that actualizes, sustains, and governs all of created reality. He's the creator and sustainer, which would entail that there is no eternal universe. God created it, which means that there was a time when the universe did not exist. But that was a good conversation. I only use the robot when whoever I'm talking to, I know they're disagreeing with something that is universally accepted by every rational thinker. Park, when you say, cool story, bro, how about you provide some evidence for that? If you're talking about empirical evidence, I'm going to give you the good news, Park. There is no empirical evidence for the natured entity God. God is not a science experiment. There is no evidence for God in that sense. That's what you're asking me. There is no evidence for God. And no knowledgeable Christian has ever claimed that God is a physical entity. We say that God is a spirit, and they that worship him must do so in spirit and in truth. My claim about the creation of the universe is not an empirical claim, which means that if you ask me to provide you with empirical evidence for that claim, your question itself shows that you don't have the ability or you refuse to reason logically. Your question is a category error. Park, I did not say there is no evidence for God. I said there is no empirical evidence. There is no empirical evidence. The same way, there is no empirical evidence for abiogenesis, but you probably believe it anyway. The Miller-Urey experiment did not create life in a lab, which means that abiogenesis is still a hypothesis, but you all treat it as though it is an accepted universal theory in the scientific community. So, if we're going to throw stones at each other about how you don't have any empirical evidence for your claim, I'm going to do the same thing, bro. You don't have any empirical evidence for abiogenesis. None whatsoever. We both have beliefs, both of us. And just to confirm, as I said, I use the robot when I'm talking about a universally accepted thing by rational thinkers that publish their works. I'm going to show you what I mean. ChatGPT, are you there? ChatGPT, are you there?
I'm still right here. What else would you like to dive into?
If I make the claim that the Miller-Urey experiment did not create life in a lab, all they did was create or produce amino acids, which are the building blocks of life, but not life itself. And the theory of abiogenesis is not yet a theory, it's still a hypothesis that's still trying to be verified. If I say that, am I inaccurate?
You're not really inaccurate in that. The Miller-Urey experiment did produce amino acids, but not life itself. It demonstrated that organic molecules could form under conditions thought to be similar to early Earth, but it wasn't creating life. And yes, abiogenesis, the idea of life arising naturally from non-living matter, is still considered a hypothesis. It's a well-studied area. but we don't yet have a complete verified pathway from chemistry to life. So you'd be representing the current...
Park, I only use ChatGPT to represent universally accepted positions within the rational thinking community. And this is what I was trying to prove. You do not have any empirical evidence for the claim of abiogenesis, which is something that you probably believe. So don't throw stones at me living in a glass house about how I don't have any empirical evidence for my God claim. I never claimed I did. God created the universe is not an empirical claim. It's not. So, congratulations. If you reject God because there is no empirical evidence for God, then you're a hypocrite because you accept abiogenesis with no empirical evidence. Congratulations. But that's only if you accept abiogenesis. And everybody on YouTube watching right now, that's the same thing I'm saying about you. If you're an atheist and you accept abiogenesis as a fact, then that's a double standard, and that's hypocritical. You see, don't care, bro. I just don't believe your God claims. Fine. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. I have no problem with that. I don't care if you don't accept my God claims. I don't care. Because in my worldview paradigm, guys, everybody listening, God has chosen before, logically prior to him creating the world, the universe, God has chosen who will go to hell and who will go to heaven. God has chosen who will be convinced and who will not be convinced by his self-attesting revelation. So Park here saying that, he's unconvinced and he just doesn't accept my God claims, it's totally fine. That is consistent with my worldview, that there are people who will not accept God. They will reject him and end up in hell. It's totally fine. Park, God will reveal himself to you if you are one of his chosen people for heaven. He will reveal himself to you if you're chosen for heaven, buddy. But if you're chosen for hell, you will never believe. I guarantee you that. If it's fine, then atheism cannot be false. Thanks for agreeing with me. Park, I'm defining atheism as a negation of God's existence. There are two ways to define atheism: positive atheism and negative atheism. Positive atheism is the positive claim that there are no gods. Negative atheism is a psychological mental state that you're just unconvinced that there is a God or you lack belief in a God. That is not false, and I've never said it was false. The other version of atheism that I'm saying is false. And you know what I'm going to have to start doing in my prompt? I'm going to have to say positive atheism is false. I'm going to have to start doing that because you people keep mistaking what I'm saying because you are unaware that there is not one definition for atheism. You're unaware of that. You're literally unaware of that. And since this is a universally accepted fact by all rational thinkers, I'm gonna bring it up to the robot. Hey, ChatGPT. Are there two definitions that are valid in our modern time for atheism, and that is positive atheism and negative atheism?
Yes, those two terms are often used. Negative atheism, sometimes called weak atheism, is simply a lack of belief in gods. No active assertion, just no belief. Positive atheism, or strong atheism, goes a step further. It's the explicit belief or claim that no gods exist. Both are valid ways people use the term today, depending on whether they're simply unconvinced or make a definite claim.
Okay, so I am not defining atheism as a lack of belief. I'm defining atheism as a propositional claim. God does not exist and there are no gods. That is a false claim. That is a false proposition. All right, so I think that I've been on here long enough. I'm going to get off of here and go read a book because there's a lot of reading that I have to do. Got to keep myself up to date, keep myself sharp. So, everybody on YouTube, thanks for watching. Everybody on TikTok, thanks for watching. That was a good conversation with the guy. His name is Deadly. That was a good conversation about change and God's essence, and change. Producing change implies a contradiction, which is not something I claimed. But, it was very fun. And then he said that he doesn't think that he can have absolute certainty about anything. And then I said, does that include your existence? And then he said, except that. But then, and I hope he goes and does some reading. If you read Immanuel Kant and Bertrand Russell's critique of the cogito, or I think, therefore I am, it's going to open your eyes to a new problem that you guys can't solve. Well, you probably can solve it, but if you do, you'll be the first one to solve the problem, because it hasn't been solved to this day. And I'm gonna ask ChatGPT if it's been solved before I end it. Hey, ChatGPT, you there?
I'm here. If there's anything else on your mind before we wrap up, just let me know.
Okay, so are you aware of Immanuel Kant and Bertrand Russell's critique of the cogito, I think, therefore I am?
I am. Kant didn't really dispute that I think implies existence, but he argued that Descartes was wrong to draw metaphysical conclusions about a permanent soul from it. Russell, on the other hand, critiqued the I in I think, suggesting that all Descartes could really say was that thoughts exist, not that there is a distinct, stable I behind them. So both pointed out that Descartes might have gone a bit too far with what he claimed to know from that starting point.
So Bertrand Russell took on the first part of the cogito. He took on the I think, and Immanuel Kant took on the I am. So is that what you're saying?
Not exactly. Russell critiqued the I part. He thought Descartes was assuming a stable, identifiable self beyond the mere occurrence of thoughts. Kant, though, wasn't disputing existence. Instead, he argued that Descartes' I think only showed that thinking exists, but you can't derive a robust metaphysical self from that alone. In short, both critiqued the leap from thinking happens to a persistent I, but they did so in slightly different ways.
Has the problems that both Immanuel Kant and Bertrand Russell, has those problems that they pointed out about the cogito been solved to this day?
They haven't been fully solved, but rather they've just evolved into ongoing philosophical discussions. Kant's critique of deriving too much metaphysical certainty from I think is still a caution in modern philosophy. Most philosophers are careful about what we can conclude about the self. Russell's point about assuming a fixed I has fed into later debates on personal identity and the nature of mind. In short, Descartes' cogito still sparks debate, but the critiques just deepened the conversation rather than ending.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, ChatGPT. All right, so the problems that Kant and Russell pointed out about the cogito to this day have not been solved. So when the atheist says that they have absolute certainty about nothing, that also includes their existence. Because every atheist I've ran into to this day, and maybe I'll run into somebody else, who says different. To this day, because their standard of epistemology is rooted in the scientific method, and the scientific method does not yield certainty about anything, absolute certainty about anything, because it's open for revision and open for change, and absolute certainty implies that you could not and cannot be wrong about the conclusion that you have if you're absolutely certain about it. Every single time I ask an atheist who holds that science is their epistemological standard, they always answer the question of, are you absolutely certain about anything? They say, no, I don't think that you can have absolute certainty about anything. And then I follow up with the question, does that include your own existence? You're not absolutely certain that you exist? They're like, oh, well, except for that. And then I point out that the problems with the cogito were pointed out by Russell and Kant, and they have not been solved to this day, which means that you still don't have absolute certainty even about your own existence because you deny God. Or you refuse to submit to the revelation of God and serve Him. The self-attesting revelation. Serve Him. Now, these are a lot of problems, guys, that you have to deal with. I am not making any empirical claims about God's existence, so I don't have to give you any empirical evidence. My claim is from Romans chapter 1, guys, that the Bible says that God's invisible attributes are clearly seen in the things that are made. But those things are clearly seen by the people of God, the elect. The non-elect will never see it. The non-elect will never be convinced. But the reason why we still run our lives, the reason why we still go out and we share the gospel is because the means that God has determined to bring about His people into salvation is the preached word and the presentation of His word. There are people out there, guys, who will never believe in God, who will never be convinced, because they are marked out by God ultimately for hell, and they will never, ever be saved. But those who are marked out by God for salvation, when God's self-attesting revelation hits them, they believe right away. No, that is not my evidence for God. My evidence for God is that creation itself reflects the nature and essence of the God of the Bible. That is not an empirical claim. It's not. It's a supernatural claim, because the reason why the universe exemplifies the attribute set of God is because the universe is created by God. And that claim about the universe being created by God is a supernatural claim, not a natural claim. It's not an empirical claim. Okay, we don't know the source of these things, thus we inject our God explanation and voila, proof. Nope, I'm not even expressing a God of the gaps answer, because I'm not saying I don't know what created the universe, therefore God. I'm saying God's self-attesting revelation gave me the answer of how the universe came into existence, and I appeal to that answer. I'm not saying I don't know, therefore God. I'm saying I know because God revealed it. That's not the God of the gaps problem, bro. And you refuse to accept the revelation of God, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine. I know why you reject God. I know, because God told me. You're hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. You're blinded by the devil. The things of God are foolishness to you because you are perishing. You have been marked out by God, ultimately, if you're not one of His elect, for hell. And nothing will change your belief about rejecting God and accepting naturalistic explanations. Because God not only determined your destiny, He also determined how you will go there. So I totally accept and I totally understand if anyone disbelieves God and never believes in God to their deathbed. Because, again, God has marked you out ultimately for hell. You'll never believe. Okay, you know because God says it. My God, not Allah's testimony, not Vishnu. Nope, mine. Of course. Because if I was talking to a Muslim who believes in Allah, if I was talking to a Hindu who believes in Vishnu, I would use the same argument. Your gods claim that they are the creator of the world. My God claims the same thing. Okay, let's look at the universe. Let's look at the world and see which one of our gods are perfectly reflected by the created world itself. Let's see. And when you watch debates with me and them, you see where In their worldview, there are lots of inconsistencies and contradictions where the world itself does not reflect the nature and essence of their God. So, inconsistency is the sign of a failed argument. Incoherence, contradiction are signs of a false proposition. So, my God, not theirs. My God. So you're right, notorious. Sorry, Nostra. I can't pronounce that. I'm sorry. I'm black and slow. So I'm gonna just say Nost. I'm just gonna say Nost. So that's my answer to your question, Nost, or to your claim. Anyways, I'm gonna jump off of here now. I'm gonna close TikTok first and then YouTube. Hey guys, peace out. Thanks for coming. Until next time. And when I say atheism is false, I mean the proposition God does not exist is false. Not I lack belief in a God. That's a psychological mental state and cannot be false by definition. So please don't misrepresent me in what I'm saying. I'm actually going to change the prompt next time. I'm going to say positive atheism is false because you guys keep misunderstanding me. I'm going to have to change the prompt. Anyways, God bless you all. Until next time. All right, let me get off of this. Everybody on YouTube, thanks for coming. Yeah, not much more to say. It's been a long video. All right, God bless you all. Until next time.